I was at the party after Lil Nas X's Grammy win. The night was supposed to be unforgettable, but not for the reasons you'd think. The music and the champagne, the flashing lights, that's what people imagine. But I saw something else. Something I can't explain. Something I wish I could forget. Because once you see what I saw that night, you understand the industry in a way you're not supposed to. And you realize some celebrations aren't for humans at all. The night of Lil Nas X's Grammy win was already electric across the city. Even if you weren't at the award show, you could feel the buzz spilling into the streets. The way every billboard seemed brighter. Every Uber driver had the radio tuned to stations replaying his performance. I wasn't dressed for Hollywood that night. I wasn't chasing the cameras. I just wanted a drink and some music loud enough to drown out my thoughts. The club I picked wasn't the kind you'd brag about later. No velvet ropes, no influencers taking selfies in the bathroom. Just a steady bass shaking the floor and lights strobing across a haze of cigarette smoke. The kind of place where everyone came for their own reasons and left without names exchanged. That was fine with me. I leaned into the rhythm, letting it swallow the edges of my mind. And for once, I didn't feel out of place. I was halfway through my drink when I felt someone sit down beside me. Not the casual way a stranger claims a stool. Not the clumsy way a drunk does. He sat down like he'd been waiting for me. At first I didn't look. People come and go in these places, but I noticed the way the air shifted. The faint sharpness of his cologne cutting through the scent of whiskey and sweat. When I finally turned, his face was calm. Too calm. Like a man playing a role he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "You like going out alone, don't you?" he said. It wasn't asked like small talk. It was a statement, like he was naming something inside me I hadn't told anyone. The music was loud enough that I should have struggled to hear him, but his words cut through, sharp and unshaken. I muttered something back. Less pressure that way. And he chuckled low, nodding like he already knew. That's when he reached into his jacket. My stomach tightened, half expecting a weapon, but his hand came back holding a card. Not a business card, not an invite with glitter and logos. Just black, matte, and heavy, with a strange shimmer that shifted when the club lights hit it. No writing, no design, just a symbol. Not one I recognized. It bent the light wrong, like oil rippling on water. He slid it across the bar with a tap of his ring. The sound was sharp, final, louder than it should have been against the wood. My eyes stayed on it longer than I meant to. He didn't say much else. Just told me there was a party happening right now. One I'd never see on Instagram. One no one would talk about tomorrow. Something in his tone wasn't tempting me with fun. It wasn't about girls or music or money. It was heavier, like he was putting a choice in front of me I didn't understand yet. He stood before I could answer, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. "Don't take too long," he said. "The door doesn't stay open forever." And then he walked into the night without looking back. I sat there staring at that black card. It was heavier than it should have been when I picked it up, like metal hidden inside. I should have thrown it away. But curiosity is its own kind of poison. And before I knew it, I was in an Uber. The card burning against my leg like it wanted me to remember I'd made a mistake. The drive didn't feel real. The city thinned around us. lights fading, storefronts replaced by hedges and iron gates. My driver never spoke, not even a glance in the mirror. He drove like he knew where I was going, like he'd done it before. My chest tightened when the streets grew too empty, the kind of silence that feels unnatural in a city like Los Angeles. And then I saw it. The mansion rose out of the dark like it had been waiting, lit in soft gold that glowed against the hills. It should have looked beautiful, but it didn't. The angles were wrong. The windows stretched too tall. The shadows stretched too far. It looked alive. The gates opened without a guard, without an intercom. Just an invisible pull that told me I was expected. The car rolled forward on its own. When we reached the front steps, I turned to ask the driver something. Anything, but the seat behind the wheel was empty. The car door hung open, waiting for me to leave. I stepped out, and the air hit me thick and perfumed, sweet on the surface but rotten underneath. My stomach turned. For a second, I thought about walking away, calling another Uber, pretending I'd never seen that black card. But the house seemed to breathe, pulling the air in and out. The lights bent back against the walls instead of spilling out. The bass from inside didn't sound like music. It sounded like a buried heart. And I realized, too late, I hadn't been invited to a party. I'd been summoned to something else, something I wasn't meant to survive. The doors opened before I touched them. A man in a black suit stood at the threshold, his smile frozen in place like it had been painted onto his skin. His eyes didn't move, not even to acknowledge me. He just stepped aside and gestured me in with a twitch of his hand, like I was already expected, like he wasn't welcoming me at all. He was delivering me. The first breath inside the mansion nearly knocked me back. The air was thick with perfume and sweat, champagne and cologne. Every inhale felt too heavy, as if I was drinking the atmosphere instead of breathing it. Chandeliers hung low, dripping gold light across polished marble floors. The light was too bright, sharp, stabbing into my eyes. And beneath it, every sound was too loud. The laughter, the clink of glasses, the footsteps sliding across the floor. But the strangest part wasn't the noise. It was the way the joy felt wrong. Every laugh was stretched, brittle, shattering into something too sharp. Every smile looked frantic, like a mask held in place too long. People clung to each other, touching too much, too often, hands brushing, lips lingering, cheeks pressed close with desperation. It was hunger disguised as affection, and they weren't just anyone. Faces I recognized drifted past. Actors I'd seen on screens, singers whose voices filled stadiums, athletes whose jerseys were sold in every store. They sparkled under the chandeliers, glittering with jewelry and silk. But when their eyes met mine, I saw something hollow. Their pupils blown wide, their gazes darting too fast. They looked alive, too alive, like they'd been wound too tightly and couldn't unwind. At first I thought maybe this was the Hollywood machine at work. Too much champagne, too much pressure, too much need to perform even in private. But then I saw him. Orlando Brown didn't blend into the crowd the way the others did. He moved through them like he was pulling invisible strings. Every step was too smooth, too deliberate, as if the floor itself carried him forward. He leaned into a woman, whispered something, and her face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. But instead of breaking, she burst into laughter so loud it silenced the space around her. He clapped a man on the back, and the man's pupils spread until his eyes were black pools. His smile stretched unnaturally wide, sweat dripping from his chin. Wherever Orlando touched, people shifted. Their voices faltered mid-sentence, their bodies jolted like puppets pulled by unseen wires. Their expressions slid across their faces, joy to despair to bliss, cycling too fast to be real. It was possession without blood, a sickness passed without a word. I froze when his eyes found mine. His grin spread wider, showing teeth that caught the light wrong, sharp where they shouldn't be. For a moment, it looked like he had more of them than a man should. He raised his glass to me in a private toast, and though the crowd still moved and the music still pounded, it felt like the whole room paused with him. A cold tremor slid through my veins just from his gaze, like he'd touched me without lifting a finger. I shoved my way toward the bar, desperate for something solid, something normal. The bartender slid a glass toward me before I asked for anything. His hands trembled, his eyes lowered. The liquid shimmered in the fractured chandelier light, darker at the edges, almost alive. I didn't drink it. The bartender muttered something under his breath, lips moving soundlessly, as though he was praying, but no words escaped. That's when I felt it. The gaze. I turned, and there he was. Diddy. He stood at the far end of the room, still and quiet, the only calm body in the chaos. He wasn't laughing, wasn't dancing, wasn't pretending. He just watched. His expression was serene, almost peaceful. But when his eyes locked on me, the rest of the room blurred away. The laughter thinned, the music dimmed, and I felt the floor tilt under my feet. It wasn't just his stare. It was the house itself shifting its focus onto me without moving a single muscle. I tried to look away. My chest tightened, my heart racing. When I finally forced myself to glance back, he was gone. The panic rose fast. My hands shook as I set the untouched glass back on the bar. I shoved through the crowd, desperate for an exit. Every brush of fingers against my arms, every laugh ringing too close in my ear made me flinch. The music grew louder, pounding in time with my heartbeat until I thought my chest might split. Then a hand clamped around my arm. I spun, and it was Orlando again. His grin stretched wider now, his eyes glittering with too much light. "You're new," he said, his voice playful, but the weight of it pressed heavy against my skin. "Don't worry. Everyone feels it their first time." "What is this?" I whispered. My throat was so dry, it felt like the words scraped coming out. He leaned in, his breath hot against my ear. "Don't fight it. You'll only make it worse." And then he was gone, swallowed back into the mass of bodies as if he'd never been there at all. I staggered toward the edge of the room, dizzy, desperate to get out. But before I reached the door, the crowd parted as if pulled by strings. And there he was again. Diddy? Closer now, just a few feet away. He didn't grin like Orlando. His smile was small, sharp, certain. The smile of someone who already knew how this would end. He raised his hand and beckoned me forward. The entire room seemed to pause. The music still thumped. The laughter still echoed. But beneath it all was silence, heavy and waiting. No one looked directly at me, but I felt their eyes, strained from the corners, watching. 1,000 unspoken glances, every one of them aware. And I don't know why I stepped forward, but I did. The moment I stepped forward, the crowd behind me shifted as one body. The sound of laughter returned. Glasses clinked. Music rose again. But none of it touched me anymore. It was like walking underwater. Every step I took, the air got colder, sharper, needling into my skin until goosebumps rose across my arms. Did he turn slowly? Not hurried, not dramatic, just sure of himself. And the crowd closed behind us like a heavy door slamming shut. We moved down a narrow hallway that stretched longer than it should have. At first, I thought it was just the way the light played tricks on the walls. But no. Every step I took, the corridor seemed to lengthen, stretching out in front of me like it didn't want me to reach the end. My footsteps echoed too loud, bouncing back against the walls in strange ways, like I was being followed by someone walking out of sync with me. The music vanished as soon as I crossed the threshold. Not faded, not muffled, vanished. Silence replaced it so completely that I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I turned once, thinking I could still see the golden glow of the party behind me. But the doorway was gone. There was no exit now, just endless dark stretching back. My chest tightened. The air felt heavier with each step, pressing against my lungs as if the hallway itself wanted to suffocate me before I got where I was going. At the far end, I saw it. A glow seeped beneath a door. Not warm light, not candlelight, but crimson. It bled into the walls, staining them red as if the house itself was filled with veins pumping some slow, heavy pulse. The glow flickered, but not like fire. It pulsed, thick and wet, like blood forcing its way through arteries too narrow to hold it. Diddy stopped at the threshold. He didn't need to gesture. He just turned slightly, the red glow cutting across his face, carving shadows into his cheekbones. His smile appeared then, calm but sharp, a blade hidden in silk. "Come on," he said softly. "You've already been chosen." The words landed heavy, not loud, but final like a verdict. The door opened without sound, and I stepped into a silence that weighed more than any noise. The air was sharp, metallic, thick with the scent of iron. Curtains of velvet lined the room, but they weren't still. They swelled and pulled back like lungs dragging in breath. The red light behind them pulsed in rhythm with the slow, inhaling walls, and it made my stomach twist. The room was empty except for him. Diddy stood in the center, his suit perfect, his posture composed. But the shadows clinging to him didn't belong to his body. They twitched, stretched, bending in directions that light couldn't explain, as if something vast and hungry pressed against his skin from the inside. He waited, still, patient, watching me with eyes that didn't blink. "You feel it," he said finally. His voice was low, but it carried everywhere. Not like sound, but like vibration. It slid into the bones of the room, into the bones of my chest, humming in ways I couldn't escape. "It's in the air, in your chest. You already know it." I wanted to deny it. My throat was dry, words scraping as I forced them out. "What is it?" His smile deepened. Not wide, not manic, controlled, gentle, terrifying. The part of me that doesn't die. And the shadows rippled at his words. They didn't just stretch across the walls, they scraped. Long black talons dragging lines into the curtains, into the floor. The sound was faint, but sharp enough to cut through the silence, a noise I felt in my teeth more than I heard in my ears. He lifted his hand slowly. Every movement was deliberate, elegant, as though he knew I couldn't look away. and as his hand rose, the darkness rose with it. It wasn't just shadow anymore. It clung, crawled, spilling from his skin like it was one with him. "Take it," he whispered. Or maybe he didn't whisper. His voice seemed doubled now, layered, as if more than one person spoke through him. "One touch and you'll never fear again. You'll never hunger. You'll never die." The curtains inhaled with the words, the sudden rush of air pressing against me so hard I staggered forward, my chest constricted. My heart fluttered, frantic, like it was trying to leap out before something else got inside. I shook my head, stumbling back, but the shadows were faster. They stretched like smoke with claws, sliding up my legs, curling around my wrists, holding me in place. They burned cold. My breath left me in a white plume, fogging in front of my face as if the temperature had dropped below freezing. Diddy stepped closer, his hand still outstretched. The closer it came, the less it looked human. Veins writhed beneath the skin, glowing faint red like cracks in porcelain. His fingers split slightly at the seams, leaking more of that living shadow. His palm glistened, not with sweat, not with liquid, but with something alive, twitching under the surface. "You think no is a choice?" His voice boomed now, layered with screams and whispers. "You are already marked." The shadow's grip tightened. My arms froze against my sides. My knees buckled. I tried to scream, but my jaw locked. The darkness pressed into my mouth, into my ears, slipping into the corners of my eyes. My skin crawled as if something inside me clawed outward, desperate to split me open. He crouched lower, bringing his face to mine. His breath was cold and sour against my cheek. His smile stretched, and then the shadow of his smile stretched wider still, splitting across his face in ways flesh couldn't. "You were brought here for this," he said, almost gently. "Do not resist." His fingertips grazed my chest. The touch ignited fire and ice at once, every nerve unraveling like threads snapping apart. My chest seared as if something was being carved into me. My vision blurred with tears I couldn't stop. And then, laughter. High, playful, sharp enough to slice through everything. The door creaked open, and Orlando slipped inside, grinning wide, eyes glittering like they carried their own light. "Puff," he drawled, casual as a man strolling into a backyard barbecue. "You know he ain't ready? Don't tear the boy apart yet." The shadows recoiled as if the laugh itself carried weight. My body collapsed forward, gasping, my chest scorched with phantom burns. Diddy's head turned slowly. His eyes weren't human anymore. Black, bottomless, filled with a storm of fury barely restrained. "He was chosen," Diddy said. His voice wasn't layered now. It was flat, cold, final. Orlando crouched beside me, his hand clapping my shoulder. His touch was colder than ice, a frost carving straight into my veins. "And he still is," Orlando said with a smirk, "but you rush it, and he snaps. You gotta let it settle. Gotta let him want it." His grin stretched wider, almost inhuman as he leaned close to my ear. "Don't worry. They always want it in the end." The room fell silent except for my ragged breathing. The shadows scratched faintly against the curtains, restless, hungry, but retreating as Diddy lowered his hand. "Get him out," he muttered, voice taut with controlled rage. Orlando laughed low, dragging me up with strength his frame shouldn't have held. My legs buckled, but he half carried me toward the door, humming a tuneless melody as if this was all a joke. My chest still burned where Diddy's hand had nearly marked me, my veins still frozen with the cold. The door shut behind us, sealing the crimson glow and whispers away. But I knew they hadn't left me. Something had already slipped in. What still chills me about that night is how ordinary it looked at first. On the surface, it was everything you'd expect from a Grammy after party. The clink of glasses, the smell of champagne spilling onto marble floors, the thrum of bass low enough to keep your chest vibrating. And everywhere you looked, people were smiling, hugging, congratulating each other like the night belonged to all of them. Every few minutes, someone would raise their glass and shout, "To Lil Nas X," and the crowd would echo it back, loud and sloppy, like the sound of joy itself. But it wasn't joy. I could hear it in the pitch of their voices. Too sharp, too frantic. It was forced, like a laugh that goes on a second too long. The name wasn't being honored. It was being used. Nas himself. I saw him only once that night, across the room, surrounded by people with faces I knew from billboards and stages. He was smiling, shaking hands, letting the congratulations wash over him. He looked alive, ecstatic even, but there was something strange about the space around him. People pressed close, too close, crowding in with flutes of champagne and wide grins, but their eyes didn't stay on him. They kept darting, unfocused, like they were staring at something over his shoulder, something hovering just behind him that he couldn't see. That was the first time I felt the wrongness. Because Lil Nas X had just made history, and yet he wasn't the center of the room. Something else was. The toasts kept coming, louder each time, the words Nas and Grammy ricocheting off the walls like mantras. But every cheer felt more like an offering. It wasn't praise, it was permission. Each glass raised was another piece of the room surrendered, another layer of humanity peeled back. The more they celebrated, the less it felt like a party, and the more it felt like a ritual no one had named out loud. And then I noticed the touching. It was subtle at first, just brushes of hands on shoulders, palms lingering on forearms, fingers slipping over knuckles. At a normal party, it could pass for intimacy. But here, it was different. It wasn't affectionate. It was functional. Every contact looked like a wire connecting to the next body, a current passing skin to skin, person to person. And with each touch, I could feel something thickening in the air, an energy that pulsed heavier with every exchange. That's when I realized what the victory had unlocked. Lil Nas X's win was fresh, pure, a kind of triumph that made people believe in possibility. That energy was contagious. Everyone wanted a piece of it, to be near it, to let it rub off on them. But in that house, the energy wasn't spreading, it was being harvested. The more people congratulated him, the more they clung to him, the stronger the current became. The non-human thing in the walls, the thing I hadn't seen yet but already felt, was feeding on it. It didn't need to show itself. The celebration itself was its feast. And the strangest part was how the celebrities behaved. These were people who lived in the spotlight, who knew how to fake joy, who made careers out of turning emotions into performance. But here, their masks cracked. I watched one actress throw her head back in laughter so jagged it turned into a sob before snapping back into a grin. I saw an athlete clink his glass too hard, the stem snapping, champagne spilling down his arm. And instead of being embarrassed, He stared at the blood beating from his palm with pupils blown wide, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. Everywhere I looked, people were unraveling at the seams, and yet no one moved to stop it. No one pulled them aside. It was as if this was expected, normal, because it wasn't chaos, it was orchestration. The chants, the toasts, the endless touching, it all built toward something. And when I turned back to the center of the room, I saw Orlando Brown standing there, arms raised slightly like a conductor before an orchestra. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough. With the smallest motions, the crowd shifted, their energy rising and falling with him. Lil Nas X's name still echoed, but it wasn't about him anymore. It was about what his win had opened. The celebration was a door, and once it swung wide, something else walked through. That's when I understood. This wasn't his night. It never had been. The Grammys crowned him in public, but in private, the crown belonged to something non-human. Something that breathed through the walls of the mansion and pressed against the skin of every person in that room. And by the time I realized it, it was already looking at me. By the time they led me deeper into the mansion, I knew I wasn't at a celebration anymore. Whatever joy had been in the air, whatever cheers had echoed Nas's name, it had already been drained, siphoned off into something else. The party was the lure, but this was the purpose. The hallway that carried me forward was colder than the rest of the house. The air thinned with each step, like I was climbing a mountain where lungs weren't meant to work. The lights shifted from gold to red, faint pulses that beat in rhythm with something I couldn't hear but felt in my bones. And when I reached the door at the end, I knew I wasn't walking into another room. I was walking into a threshold. The door opened with a hiss. Inside, the walls were black mirror and obsidian, polished so perfectly I could see warped reflections of myself, faces stretched and twisted as though the mirrors weren't showing me, but what I would become if I stayed. Lights glowed low in the floor like stars trapped under glass. Along one wall, waveforms flickered silently on screens, jagged lines frozen mid-beat. It looked like a recording studio, but one built for something darker, something older, a place where sound wasn't created, but consumed. And standing in the center was Diddy, all black. No chains, no flex, nothing to remind me of the man I'd seen on magazine covers. He didn't need it. His calm was more terrifying than any performance. He smiled as if he'd been waiting for me, as if every step I'd taken that night had been leading here. Music is the first language, he said, his voice smooth, almost gentle, but heavy, like it carried the weight of centuries. Before words, before war, there was rhythm, vibration. The one thing that makes billions of people move together without ever touching. It makes them family. It makes them obey. He gestured around the room, hands open like a preacher before his congregation. And then he stepped aside. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a machine, some kind of art piece sealed behind glass. But then it moved. The chamber itself breathed, slow and steady, the glass expanding and contracting like lungs. Inside, it was something tall and thin, humanoid in shape, but not in essence. Its skin was the color of ash, smooth and polished like stone. Its veins glowed faint red beneath the surface, pulsing with the same rhythm as the lights in the floor. Its mouth was slightly open, not gasping, not desperate, just waiting. Its eyes were closed, but the lids twitched. The movement beneath them too fast, like it was dreaming, like it was already aware of me. It wasn't dead. It was patient.
This, Diddy whispered, reverent, is who we answer to. The true king. The words sank into the air like smoke, thick and choking. And suddenly, all the toast to Lil Nas X, all the champagne, all the frantic laughter made sense. The win wasn't the point. The win was the gateway. The moment the world celebrated one man, the door opened wide enough for this thing to feed. Behind me, I heard the sounds of others. Not laughter, not conversation, but chanting. Around the edges of the chamber, people knelt. Some sobbing, some whispering in tongues. Some rocking back and forth with their eyes rolled back. A man in a designer coat had collapsed face down, shaking with dry sobs. A woman in red lace swayed like she was possessed, her movements out of sync with the rhythm, but feeding into it all the same. They weren't worshiping Diddy. They weren't worshiping fame. They were worshiping the thing in the glass. Diddy picked up a small glass from a table beside him. Inside, it was a liquid darker than blood, thicker than oil, shimmering faintly as though alive. Even from across the room, I could feel it moving, pressing against the glass, wanting out. He handed it to me. "This is from him," he said. His voice dropped lower, almost tender. One drop, and the game changes forever. The glass was heavy in my hand, pulsing faintly like it had a heartbeat of its own. My knees weakened as I stared down at it. The liquid didn't just shimmer, it shifted, pressing against the sides of the cup, almost breathing with me, waiting for my lips. That's when the chamber stirred. Its chest rose higher. Its head tilted the smallest degree, as if catching a scent. And then its eyes opened. They weren't human. No whites, no pupils. Just red, glowing and endless, staring at me with a hunger that wasn't rushed because it didn't need to be. It already knew, and I couldn't breathe. My soul felt stretched thin, as though it had been yanked to the glass by invisible hands. My chest tightened with the weight of it. I couldn't tell if I was about to cry or collapse. All I knew was that it wanted me. Not my body, not my voice. Me. The tears came before I knew I was crying. My hands shook, but I couldn't drop the glass. It was like my own fingers had turned against me, holding tight to the thing that wanted to hollow me out. Around me, the others fell deeper into trance. Their voices rose higher, chants layering into a sound that wasn't language but still communicated. Each syllable a thread weaving into a net I couldn't escape. The woman in red tilted her head back, her mouth open wide in a silent scream that made no sound but vibrated in the walls. And Diddy? He just watched, calm, patient, like a teacher waiting for a student to solve the problem he already knew the answer to. "You sure?" he asked quietly. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Lil Nas X's Grammy win was the excuse. The music industry was the perfect mask, but the real stage wasn't the award ceremony, wasn't the red carpet, wasn't the gold trophy held high. The real stage was this chamber, this presence, this thing that fed. Not on music, but on surrender. That was the non-human I'd felt all night, and it was closer than ever. I don't remember deciding to run. My body moved before my mind caught up, like survival had grabbed the reins. 1 second I was holding that pulsing glass, the non-human thing in the chamber staring through me. And the next, I was moving, shoving the cup away, shattering it on the floor. For a split second, I swore the liquid bled. The chamber twitched, its red eyes narrowing, its chest swelling as if it had finally noticed me in full.
But I didn't stay to see what came next.
The hallway bent around me as I stumbled forward. Lights strobing red and black. Walls pulsing like veins, squeezing tighter the faster I moved. The sound that replaced the chants was worse. Low, guttural vibrations that made the air too thick to breathe. My legs didn't feel like my own anymore. They shook, heavy, but still carried me through doors that opened and closed without touch.
That's when I saw Cam. He was waiting near the glass door at the far end, chest heaving like he'd been searching for me. His face was pale, eyes wide, not sure if he even recognized me anymore. "Yo, what the hell?" he said, but I couldn't stop to answer. I grabbed his arm, my voice low and panicked. "We're leaving. Now."
We pushed through together, and the air outside hit me like a slap. Cold, real. My lungs burned as if I'd been drowning inside that house and only now broke the surface. For a moment, I thought we'd done it, that we'd left the nightmare behind.
But then, I saw him.
Dre was already standing on the curb, hoodie up, arms crossed, calm in a way that didn't fit the night. Too calm. Like he hadn't just been in the same house, in the same storm. He looked at us, faint smile on his lips, phone in hand like he'd been waiting for the Uber this whole time.
"Y'all ready?" he asked.
Cam gave a sharp nod. I just stared at him. Something in his face was off. Not wrong, not monstrous, but distant. Like part of him was still inside the mansion. Like the house had let him leave physically, but kept something of him back, something it would call on later.
The Uber rolled up with headlights cutting across the dark street. Dre climbed in first, calm as ever. Cam slid in beside him. I hesitated. My chest still burned where Diddy's hand had nearly touched me. My veins still pulsed cold with the shadow Orlando had pressed into me. And I knew leaving the mansion didn't mean leaving what it had done to us. But what choice did I have? I climbed in. The car pulled away, tires crunching against the gravel. And when I looked back, the mansion was gone. No glowing windows, no iron gates, no sign it had ever existed. Just empty darkness, silent hills, as if the house had folded itself back into the night like it had never been there. For a few minutes, none of us spoke. The only sound was the steady hum of the engine and the city slowly returning around us. Streetlights, gas stations, the familiar neon blur. It should have calmed me. It didn't. Because even as the city reappeared, the hum from the mansion still vibrated in my bones. My chest still ached. My skin still crawled like invisible hands brushed against it. And Dre sat too still, eyes low, mouth curled into that faint smile as if he was hearing something we couldn't. That's when it hit me. The mansion didn't need to chase us. It didn't need to drag us back because it had already sent pieces of itself with us. The mark, the seed, the infection that wasn't spread by blood or breath but by surrender. We hadn't escaped. We'd been released. And not for our benefit, for theirs. Because once you've been touched by something non-human, once you've looked into its eyes, once you've stood in its presence, you don't leave clean. You leave marked. The Uber driver glanced at us in the mirror, eyes dark and unreadable. "Rough night?" he asked.
His voice was casual, but it carried the same too casual weight as the man who'd handed me the black card at the club.
And for a split second, when the headlights of another car flashed across his face, I swore his pupils expanded, swallowing the light.
I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see anymore, because the truth had already settled deep in me. The party after Lil Nas X's Grammy win wasn't about music. It wasn't about awards. It wasn't about him. It was about feeding something else, something that wasn't human.
And now it was everywhere.
When people talk about that night, they'll only remember the headlines. Lil Nas X winning big, the cameras flashing, the memes from his red carpet outfit, maybe in a few leaked clips of celebrities raising glasses in some golden lit room, shouting his name with champagne in hand. But what I saw wasn't for headlines. It wasn't meant to be spoken at all, because that party wasn't about Lil Nas X. He was the excuse, the cover, the story the world would accept. A young artist claiming victory, a moment of history to distract everyone from what was happening behind the walls of that mansion. His name was the song, but the presence, the thing that breathed through those walls, the thing sealed in glass, was the one being honored. And that's the part that haunts me most. Once I left, I thought it was over. I told myself the mansion was gone, that the night had ended the second the Uber turned back onto the city streets. But nights like that don't end. They linger, they spread, they live inside you.
At first, it was small, the way my chest still ached where Diddy's shadow had almost branded me, the way Therese couldn't sleep without seeing the woman in red in his mirror, the way Dre carried himself afterward, calm, too calm, like part of him was listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. Then came the realization that this wasn't a secret kept inside one house. It was a contagion, passed hand to hand, breath to breath, smile to smile. Every toast, every touch, every whispered deal was another thread spun from that same web. And the mansion wasn't just a place, it was a doorway, one of many. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. That night was proof that the industry isn't run by people. Not really. People are just the hosts, the faces, the trophies to put in front of cameras. Behind them, beneath them, around them, there's something else. Something that doesn't crave fame or fortune because it doesn't need to. It craves surrender. It craves the moment you give yourself away, piece by piece, until there's nothing left that's human. And what better stage for that than the Grammys? A night when millions are watching, when victory is pure, when the whole world believes in the magic of music. That's when the mask fits best. That's when the doorway opens widest. I didn't leave that mansion untouched. None of us did. Even now, I still feel it sometimes. A hum in the walls when the night gets too quiet. A flicker in the corner of my eye when I'm alone. A shadow that stretches longer than it should. It doesn't matter how far you run. Once you've been inside, you carry it with you forever. So when people ask me what it was like being at the party after Lil Nas X's Grammy win, I never talk about the music or the celebrities or the champagne. I tell them the truth, that there was something else there. Something that wasn't human. And it's still here.